Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Tampa City Council. I'd like to call this meeting to order. First order of business, I'd like to recognize Councilman Maniscalco for our invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's my honor this morning to welcome a gentleman who really needs no introduction because he is one of the best human beings here in the city of Tampa and one of the best speakers, as we've heard him speak many, many times before. The gentleman is Mr. Ron Weaver. A little bit about Mr. Weaver. He's a Harvard Law Honors graduate. He founded 155 lawyers statewide, Stearns Weaver Law Firm. He's chaired over half a dozen chamber committees, chaired the St. Joseph's Hospital Finance Committee and Baycare Finance Committee, and also has been recognized as a junior league luminary amongst, that's a short bio amongst his many, many accomplishments. So if we could please stand, and Mr. Weaver, come on up and please give the invocation.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, we pray for this great Tampa City Council and staff, and every citizen's needs, especially the vulnerable to life and serenity-saving shelter and desperately needed mobility to work and education and meds. Shine 7 million lights again like Saturday into restoring refound rule of law, free expression, even-handed, non-vindictive justice. Please save us from legally dubious militarization of our cities and our high seas. Bring us real, lasting peace, not performative, transactional peace prize tryouts. Purge our personal and national sins of pride, neglect of poor, racism, division, and selfish strife. For compassionate generosity, not generational wealth, not degenerative power, not treacherous flatteries, not betrayals of even-handed rule of law, nor suppressing of free speech or free elections any longer. We renew the 1800 John Adams prayer dedicating the East Wing his successor is tearing down in his own image. Lord, may never there be any but wise and honest rulers under this roof, collapsing today, weeping full the Potomac. Give us genuine submission to your compassionate will, not our own. Not our own. May freedom no longer weep, nor justice sleep or weep for her and your ordained judges and their families threatened just for doing their sworn duty. Pierce our conscience to restore our history of our wrongs, lest we repeat them. Restore wisdom, truth, compassion, integrity upon which you founded this nation and can now redeem it with that same wisdom and truth, compassion, and integrity. May power, purse, and privilege disguised as patriotism no longer parade lawlessly or unevenly or vindictively. May Hillsborough River and the Appalachia and the Potomac hear again the sweet liberty, irrepressible sounds like that prayer I will pray a second time from 1800 from John Adams dedicating the East Wing. Lord, may there never be any but wise and honest rulers under this roof, collapsing as we pray, weeping full the Potomac. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Weaver, I don't have a microphone, but I do have this. So. Wow. Wow. I think we could just adjourn now. Yeah. Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Miranda. Here. Maniscalco. Here. Hurtak.
Here.
Vieira. Here. Carlson. Here. And Clendenin.
Here.
We have a physical quorum.
Good morning. Okay, thank you. Can we get a motion to adopt the regular session, minutes from the regular session on October 9th, 2025, and the evening session held on October 16th, 2025? We have a motion from Councilman Maniscalco, second from Councilwoman Hurtak. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, we're going to have the agenda review of all agenda reviews this morning. Let's see, I need to...
I've got one.
Councilwoman Hurtak, hold on one second. Let me get my head straight because I've got to make sure I get all this right. We got a bunch of stuff. Got that one. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, item number 32 needs to be heard with item number
61.
61.
Yes.
So
we need to
that
pull,
one-
I motion to pull 32 to be heard
I
with
will-
61.
I will motion to, so moved, I
Okay.
guess.
We have a motion from Councilwoman Hurtak, a second from Councilman Maniscalco. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. We have a memo from Councilman Bill Carlson requesting 64 be continued to the February 26, 2026 workshop. That is the ethics. Now, I have thoughts about that.
So do I.
I'll be honest with you.
If I can,
Yes.
do you want to take this up now at this point? Or do you want to entertain it at a later point?
Well, I think that's why I want to have thoughts, and then let council make that decision about whether.
Thank you.
My thought is that we have a redundancy, and I understand from the political expediency at the time when it was passed for Tampa to have its own ethics ordinance, but we're already covered by state of Florida statute and constitution, and it seems redundant. That I would be willing to entertain having this council just, so we don't have to worry about being out of compliance with the state of Florida, eliminating this completely and just conforming with state statute. Councilwoman Hurtak.
I think this can have a discussion that possibly could move it to a workshop, but I think maybe if we had it during that time, and this is the reason why, because right now, and I talked to Mr. Shelby about this, we've gotten a lot of email.
Right.
We've gotten a lot of people here that may want to speak about that today, but because it's a first ordinance, because of our rules, they're going to be allowed to speak during this and during public comment if they want to speak on something else today. So I would also, just for me, I would like to hear from the public during item 64 before we make a decision. I think I know what they're going to say, but I think some people are here solely to talk about that. So I would like to give them, but I agree, we should have a discussion about it. I like your idea. The workshop idea isn't bad. I've heard other things. So I do believe that we should have a discussion about it at that item, but I'm not opposed to moving it to something else or doing something. I just think we should talk about it.
So, Councilor, since this is your memo, I'll defer to
Yeah,
your.
first of all, I think we can continue it. If we continue it, then we give the public, because we've seen from the emails, I haven't seen a single email that says we should do this. And so the problem with this process is that the administration combines some required changes with some aspirational changes of the administration without much notice for the public, and the public needs a chance to weigh in with more than just public comment. And the reason why I suggested moving it to a workshop is because the public may have additional ideas. And this, I agree with you, Council Chair Clendenin. This has mostly been used since in the last 10 years that it's been here as punishment towards City Council, and not fairly implemented toward the administration, which is why I also wanted to put a relook at the Ethics Commission in that discussion in February. What I would suggest is we put it, we make a motion to move it. We still hear from the public today. We hear from the public then, and during that conversation in February, we could make a motion to get rid of it altogether, or you could make a separate discussion. But I think whenever it is, the public needs to be assured, even though they're against a couple pieces of this that the mayor has proposed, they need to be assured that we're following ethical standards and that we're holding the administration and council and staff up to the highest standards.
Yeah, my thing on that, basically, on my assessment of this is that since this was created, it's kind of the height of bureaucracy, that it's a feel-good thing and it hasn't really been effective. So why are we doing something that is not effective? Councilman Maniscalco.
Yeah, just my thoughts briefly. We have to hear from the public. I've heard everybody else, but this whole citizens need to register as lobbyists thing to speak to us is the most ridiculous thing. If somebody stops me in the grocery store, at the gas station, at the coffee shop and says, hey, when are you going to fix my road? Hey, you're the worst person in the world. Hey, whatever it is, they have the right to speak to us. And
Yeah,
putting this in place is, I had to check with our attorney to go, to ask, am I reading this correctly?
I
mean,
think we'll
this
get
is-
unanimous consent on that.
It's like, come on, you know? Thank you very much.
Councilman Vera, did you want to speak?
Yeah, just very briefly, a couple of things, which is, I mean, I've been approached about this, and I guess Mrs. Elman, obviously, I'm sure wants to speak on this.
Let her have that last word.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you. You know, what I have told people is, listen, my understanding of this, I'm very likely going to vote against this and not support this 99%. I always like to hear from people who are proposing in terms of the rationale of why they're doing this and so forth. That's why I put the 99% and so forth. You know, with regards to the Ethics Commission, with the information I have, I wouldn't support getting rid of it. And I do think they play a valuable role. I know some of the people who serve on there who are legal colleagues who are, frankly, some of the most ethical, decent people of integrity I know, who I just would stand behind 100%. They're amazing people, amazing attorneys, amazing people of ethics. And so I do think that, but again, I don't want to get into that discussion at this time right now and debate the merits of that. But in terms of this, you know, my initial impression is absolutely not. But yeah, that's all.
Okay, very good. Councilman Miranda?
Thank you, Chairman. I have a little bit of feeling of what everyone said regarding this. I think it's a lot of items into one ordinance. I feel that if you come here, you have certainly the right, no matter where you're at, where you live, even outside the city of Tampa, to come here and say you don't like something, appreciate something that's on for or against. And I don't think directly this would involve you saying, as a citizen, taxpayer of the city of Tampa, to tell the council members exactly how you feel, whether it's appropriate or not. That's your feeling, and that's how you have the same right as we do to express our feelings. We're all in the same city. I think there's things that have to be cleared up, and why is it written this way? It's fine. I don't exactly understand. What I think it means, and some of the things that I read here, means that if you come up to testify on something and you know that some friend of yours or you are going to get remunerated or something paid to, then that's a different story. I don't know that covers this or not, and I think it needs a little bit of cleaning up to do. I'm not for or against it. I think it needs to be a tune-up before I can vote on it.
Councilwoman Hurtak?
Again, my interest is for the public who came here today that knew they would be able to speak on just this item because we allow public comment on first readings. So I would be fine. I mean, again, I'm happy to consider a continuance, but for the people who are here today that want to speak on this, I still think we need to, if we want to move it further up in the agenda so that people can speak before they have to leave, if we want to put this after public comment so that we can then just move forward with it, I'd be fine. But I truly believe that the public should be able to speak on both the agenda today, because we have a very full agenda, and on this item. So that is what I want to wait for, and that's I have no problem with the continuation of the discussion of but I want to hear from the public who came today to speak on this.
Yeah, I think
Councilman Carlson?
considering that at least 100% of the comments I've had are negative against it, then the question is, what should be in it, if anything, going forward? And so that, to me, could be what the public comment is. I would rather make a motion to continue it and then also hear public comment. I agree that we should hear public, but if we have to, if we can't continue it till then I would like to make a motion to hear this after public comment this morning as the next item.
We have Mr. Shelby
Just a reminder, council, if you look at your agenda, you have a closed session.
at 11 o'clock.
And that is with a court reporter, and that is the clock running, so it's a time certain.
Yes, but this is just after public comment.
Right, I just
We're
want to
not-
make sure council is aware that when
I think
11 o'clock comes.
I think we can accommodate this.
Yeah, I think
Thank
the
you.
point is good that it's not fair to make the public stay until 4 o'clock so they can comment the second time. Let's let them comment now.
I want to provide one clarification, because I did have discussions with the mayor, have discussions with staff about the memo that was sent. There was a misunderstanding and misclarification of the intent of what that memo, so the memo misstated the position of the administration and the mayor. So it's an unfortunate thing that was disseminated, but I want to make sure.
Remember that the genesis of this was when the mayor's office and the legal department, before this city attorney, went after 3 or 4 city council members, and the mayor had a press conference to talk about ethics in the city when the mayor's office was not held to the same standard. And so there's a lot of discussion about this, but the way the public sees this as being, is not only prohibiting the public from being able to communicate with the city council, but also to be punitive toward city council by enabling, in effect, the mayor and the lobbyists who are lobbying her to look at all the calls between city council and constituents. And so we can talk about the merits of it later, but it was not. My point is that the origination of this is not for benign purposes. There's a whole history on this, and
Yes.
and they have taken out some of the most offensive things that they had tried to put in earlier, but we ought to look at it as what it is, and make sure that we have a full public hearing, which I'm sure the administration doesn't want. If it's in a workshop in February, the public is going to weigh in on their thoughts about ethics for city council and the mayor's office, and that's not what they want. They want it to be narrowly defined towards city council. Thank you.
I'd like to now hear from our city attorney, Andrew Zellman, about.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief, and I do, speaking of unforced errors, the legal department caused a lot of the controversy that's swirling today, and that's around one piece of this long ordinance, which is the language about calling people who are lobbying but not for compensation lobbyists. Again, in 2022, the mayor had asked the Ethics Commission to look at the definition of lobbyists and whether it made sense to distinguish between compensated and not compensated. The intent was never to stop people from being able to talk to council members, talk to decision makers at the city. What the intent was at the time, because there were a lot of things swirling. There were also a lot of complaints about lobbyists wandering the halls of city council. There were people that were lobbying and not registering, true lobbyists who were not registering as lobbyists. So the intent was to create more transparency, and that was one thing that was looked at. It got lost in translation. And these recommendations of the Ethics Commission, which did recommend this change, were brought to you in 2023. There was a lot of discussion then, including by Councilman Carlson and Stephanie Pointer. It was continued to a February 24 hearing, then it was pulled from the agenda. So the mistake the legal department made was twofold. One was we put the recommendations of the 2022 Ethics Commission into this ordinance, along with other changes that need to be made to bring our code consistent with state statute, and didn't go back and talk to the mayor about, do you still want to go forward with all these changes? That is our fault. And again, it's not the intent was never to create barriers between the public and the decision makers in the city. So I'm asking you to kind of unravel it, and what I would suggest to the motion, to your motion you're making, Councilman Carlson, is continue the broader discussion of the Ethics Commission and the issues that Councilman Chairman Clendenin made and all that to February, but I would ask that you also direct the legal department to bring back a clean ordinance that just focuses on those changes we have to make to bring our ethics code back into compliance with state statute, because we have several items, and Megan is here and can tell you which ones that we really need to bring our ethics code up to code, if you will. There's been changes made in the state statutes. There was a change made in the Florida Constitution several years ago that our ethics code doesn't reflect. So allow us to do that and continue the rest of the discussion. That's fine.
But
And
Ms.
again,
Zellman, wouldn't
unforced error on our part, and I
Wouldn't this be
apologize for that.
Wouldn't this be self-resolved if in February we came to a conclusion that having our own, when the state of Florida already covers ethics of elected officials?
This is not the
I know.
time for this discussion.
Well, it kind of
Sorry,
is, because
point
we
of
have
order.
to, we have, well,
We're going to talk about this after public comment, and
Well-
I believe that's the time for this conversation.
well, we had public comments. We're not gonna talk about it. We're gonna let the public talk about it.
Yes, but we're going to talk about it afterwards.
But just
I would-
just in terms of scheduling,
Clear.
just in terms of
Councilman
scale,
Carlson.
can I just ask, as city attorney, to Councilmember Hurtak's point, considering that you also agree that this needs to be revised, we obviously need to change the first hearing of it. Can you just withdraw it as the proposer, and then we could still hold public comment on it? How can we still hear public comment on this point without, I'm asking the legal attorney,
Well, we can do anything we want.
how can we'll have regular public comment, but can we continue this, or can you cancel it, but we'll still hear public comment?
Okay, I've got the solution. So what I would like to have is this is what, I'm gonna put two parts in this. We have a motion to continue this item per Councilman Carlson's request to the February 26, 2026 workshop. And then I would like a motion from council to waive the rules to allow public comment on this item after public, general public comment.
And I will disagree, because we don't know what we're gonna hear from the public, our motion may change.
To continue it?
Yes,
So,
so it
okay.
might add more things, that's what I'm just saying.
Are you okay with us moving forward after public comment to deal with this issue after public comment? Motion to waive the rules to address this issue after public comment, and then if it's, then we'll entertain that idea to,
We already moved this to
We
after
didn't- we
public
didn't
comment,
vote-
we've
we didn't
already
vote.
done
We
that.
didn't vote on it yet.
we didn't vote.
So let me just make a motion first to move this to after public comment.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to move this item to after public comment. We have a second from Councilwoman Hurtak. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. We'll address this issue after public comment. Okay, there's one. I told you this was gonna be an interesting agenda review. We have more. And wait, there's more. Okay, if you all saw your emails this morning, Councilwoman Hurtak?
Oh, I thought you were gonna let me go.
Oh, go ahead. Because I sent a memo about 66 and
Okay.
67. So I,
This is tangentially related.
okay. Based on information that came to light over some investigatory calls and discussions over the last few days that I've had with the administration on items 66 and 67, there are issues that had not previously been seen the light of day. I believe that it is prudent for this council to continue these items to the January 29th, 2026 workshop to be able to gather further information from the administration on the financial status of the account.
And that's,
Is that a motion, or did you?
Yeah,
pass
yeah,
it
I have a motion to continue, well, I mean, I can't make it, but.
You can
let me
pass the
give- Let me
gavel.
give you pass the gavel. I'd like to make a motion to continue items 66 and 67 to the January 29th, 2026 workshop. Because we already have a capital improvements project item on that item, it'll give us opportunity, to give the staff an opportunity to provide this council and with individual briefings on what's happening with the stormwater fund and the implications this project has on that fund. Councilwoman Hurtak.
Second.
we need a second first. So, well, and I have a gavel right now,
Okay.
so basically what I'm gonna say is, again, this is the time for us to talk about this. We've all had individual meetings. We need to talk about this before we continue it, because I want to hear from some of our staff. I want to hear from the public. I want to talk about this, because also my motion is to move item 73 before it, because it's tangentially related. Item 73, believe it or not, it's the review of the Lower Peninsula Watershed Plan project. There is money in that hasn't been accounted for that might actually be being used for this. This is the conversation I want to have. So I would like to move, my motion would be to move item 73 before 66 and 67, have a conversation about 66 and 67, and then possibly have that motion. But I want to talk to you all about it. Because once we move it, once we continue it, we can't talk about it.
Well, here's the thing, is that I don't think, that there's a lot of information that I am now privy to.
Yes, so am
that-
I, and
yeah.
I've been working on this, and
Yeah.
I want to talk about it.
Well, but the problem is the other council members have not, and I think that's why it'd be more appropriate to be dealt with at a workshop, so that we could so that everybody comes to the dais with the same information.
This is the only time we can talk. I want to talk about this. If you move it, I'm going to talk about it during new business.
Well, we can talk.
So
Mr.
I'm
Chair,
telling you now, we're going to talk about it one way or the other.
Why can't we talk about it under 73?
Yeah.
We just move these two and talk about them as
Because
separate.
it's related, and I still want to talk about the merits of 66 and 67 today.
Madam Chair Pro Tem, there is a motion and a second on the floor.
Discussion.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yes.
You know, today is today, and January 26th is about 3 months away. And I don't know if these figures that I'm looking at are gonna hold without anything being brought up to the attention of the contract being extended. How much cost is gonna cost the taxpayers? And we're all taxpayers in this room, to meet the qualifications of the contract that has been signed. There's one for 4.132 million, the other one is for 3.178 million. And I don't know the cost of equipment, the cost of manpower, the cost of delays. That's not ever been discussed that I know of, and I want clarity before I vote.
Madam Chair.
Yes, I'm sorry, Councilman Vieira, you haven't spoken yet.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Yeah, so, I mean, I would be inclined to support some sort of continuance. I would think that it may be more proper to vote on this maybe after public comment, and I do want to hear from staff because I haven't had the opportunity to speak to them on the effect of a continuance to January. If it doesn't have a really adverse effect on this project, I would be inclined to support that, but I would want to inquire on that. So in other words, again, I would be inclined to support some sort of continuance and have a discussion on it. So I'm positively inclined, so it's a matter of procedure, not substance for me, if that makes sense.
Madam Chair Pro Tem, I believe John Bennett is here and he can
Yes,
probably address that as well.
Councilman Carlson.
There were a lot, as Chair Clendenin said, there are a lot of issues that have come to light about budgeting and other things, and a big concern is that there are some plans that are embedded in here which have not been presented to the public, and if we vote on something that the public doesn't fully understand, has not had a chance to give feedback to, they may hear or see it for the first time today. For example, the map has changed, and so it's not. If we vote on this today, then it's not giving the public a chance. The other thing is that 66 now is commingling pipes water money with this project, which I don't know if the bond covenants allow us to do that, but I don't think we should allow it to happen. And also, as I said to staff a couple days ago, I don't think that the water department ought to get blamed for this project because it's so unpopular. Their water department has separate. What's happened is the map now has the water department projects on it, and it really has nothing to do with stormwater. The other thing that we know now is that the city has no money for this, and approving this project, even $3 million, means that we're going to have to raise the stormwater fee. And so I think we needed a fulsome discussion. If we need $100 million and we need to raise the stormwater fee, the public needs a longer discussion about that, and it's not just a $3 million project. That's why I think it should be continued.
And Councilman Carlson, that's the whole point. We need to have a discussion about this today. Even if it's brief, just be able to get some of that stuff out into the light, to talk about it a little bit, and then continue it. I don't have a problem with continuations after we have the time to discuss, but we cannot talk about this anywhere else but here on the dais. And I do believe we need to have this discussion.
Why can't we talk about it during 73? I don't understand.
How about this? Can we just group them together and then we do the motions after?
Why don't we just make a motion to continue these two and then add a discussion of 66 and 67 in this, but then we would have already continued the decision on it.
So we currently have a motion on the floor to continue this. But again, we can also continue this after we talk about it.
Could I propose an amendment to the motion to add a discussion of the contents of 66 and 67
I don't
during
think
73?
that's appropriate. We need two separate motions. Yes.
I mean, some of the city officials are here. Maybe we'll ask them exactly what the interpretation is.
But again, that's what
That's what
item
I wanna have.
66
I wanna
and
have a
67
discussion.
is. But we want to have the discussion, but now is not the time for the discussion. Now the time is for agenda review. So I have a motion on the floor. We'll go ahead. I think we're probably going to need a roll call vote for this. We have a motion to continue this to January from 66 and 67.
January 29th, 2026 workshop.
And there's a second.
And then and just so you know, during new business, I'm gonna get clarification from the city staff to what I'm expecting.
Full-on discussion
Okay.
during new business,
Okay.
because if this goes, I still have a lot to talk about.
Okay.
There's a motion by Chair Clendenin. There's a second by Councilmember Carlson. Councilman Vieira.
Thank you very much. So again, I want to be clear on my vote. I would be inclined to support this, but I want to first talk to staff publicly about some issues because I do want to inquire on the length of the continuance and what, if any, effect this would have on the project. That's my only increase. So I would support your motion if it came after that, just to be clear. So I'm supportive, but I want to first ask that question.
Okay, roll call.
Miranda,
Staff's aware.
No.
Maniscalco,
Yes.
Hurtak,
No.
Henderson, I'm sorry, Vieira,
With that qualification, no.
Carlson. And Clendenin.
Yes.
Motion failed due to lack of a majority vote. It's a tie vote.
And may I ask a quick question, if I may? I mean, and by the way, I don't want to litigate this issue in opening, but if staff tells me that this does not adversely affect the project, right, I would be willing to support that.
Now is not the time for
I know,
that
and that's what I'm
discussion.
saying. But I just want to be clear, which is, this will likely be moved to address these pivotal concerns,
Okay.
but yeah.
So we can have that discussion during the agenda item, which will now be on the agenda. So that motion had failed, so we continue.
Can I make a
Counsel-
motion to move 73?
To move it?
Yes, I wanted to move 73 to before 66 and 67.
We have a motion from Councilwoman Hurtak to move 73 to be heard before 66 and 67. We have a second from Councilman Maniscalco. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, the ayes have it. Okay, move before 66 and 67, okay. Okay, so let's move on to this, anything else on the agenda for? No, sir. Okay, I think, yeah, that was enough. We do not have an administrative update unless that has changed, Chief Bennett? Okay. So staff reports, let's
If I
go
can-
through, Mr. Shelby.
No, that's fine. We can take care of some things after you do the staff reports.
Okay. Okay, let's start with, well, actually, I do have one more thing. The public hearing number 63 was misnoticed and cannot be heard. I need a motion to reschedule that public hearing to December 4th, 2025 at 1:30 p.m. We have a motion from Councilman Miranda, a second from Councilman Maniscalco. And all those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed, the ayes have it.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Councilman Carlson.
I could say this later during consent, but I just would like a separate vote on number 2 and number 32.
2. And 32?
Yeah.
Yes, with 61.
Okay.
Okay, see, that, we're gonna be pulling that together, so.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, separate. Okay. Anything else before we move on to staff reports? Okay, 66.
And 67, we're already.
That's- Yeah, we're already hearing.
68, I have to read aloud.
Okay, yep, that was already done. 69.
Yes,
There's-
if I may, person for here for
We
that.
do want
yes.
somebody.
Yes,
Staff,
please.
okay. Brandon's gonna be here for 70, so yes. 71 streetcar, we got a memorandum. Does anybody need staff for that? No. Okay, so no staff for 71. Brandon, you're off the hook. Let's see, Brandon is going to be here
72,
for
yes.
72, yes.
73, we've already done.
Yes, we already talked about 73.
74, yes, please.
Yes.
75, yes.
It's gonna be a fun day.
Mm-hmm.
Receive and file 76, 78 times.
Okay, we have a motion to receive and file staff reports 76, 77, 78, and 79 from Councilman Maniscalco. A second
Can I-
from? Councilman Carlson, you had something?
No, after a second, I want to make a comment.
Yeah, me too.
We have a second from someone?
Ma-
Second from Councilman Miranda. All those in favor say aye. Aye,
Aye.
opposed, ayes have it. Council,
I knew the original.
okay,
Oh, sorry.
yeah. We have, Councilman Carlson, you had something to say?
Yeah, just in regard to 78, there was a memo from Chief Burkhall, which probably was written by the administration, but it kind of is a middle finger to the public and to city council, saying,
Yeah.
if we want to use stormwater money on parades, we will use it anyway. And they go back to use the security and safety excuse, which they've used before, and that's not acceptable. In new business, if nobody else does it, I'll make a motion to create an ordinance to prohibit the administration from using stormwater dollars on parades. It's a disgusting misuse of money.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I was going to talk about the very same thing, and so I do believe that we should talk about it during new business. So I was just going to say that, yeah, we
Okay.
need to talk about how we want to handle that, because the public has been very clear. They don't want stormwater funds to be spent on parades.
Okay, and one more thing to add to the agenda, please. I've invited a special guest, Robert Hendrickson, who is a facilitator to be, for y'all to meet. I'd like to place that on the agenda at, what time did we decide that was, Shelby?
2:15? About
Two,
between
around,
2:15 and
approximately
2:30.
2:15-ish. So we have, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Motion from Councilman Maniscalco, second from Councilman Miranda. All those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed, ayes have it. Well, just to
If
place
you-
it on the agenda.
And if you can, that might be an appropriate time to talk about that item, if you can.
Oh, yeah, we
If it
could,
fits,
yeah.
if it fits your subject
Okay.
in the course of
You know,
business.
we'll play that in real time and I'll motion to waive the rules to be able
Okay,
to
thank you.
accommodate that if that works out. Okay, anything else before we move on? We're going to motion to approve the agenda? We have a motion from Councilman Miranda, a second from Councilman Maniscalco. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Councilwoman Hurtak.
I just wanted, as Mr. Shelby often reads the rules for public comment, I want to clarify and let people know that what we've decided is if you want to speak on the ethics, you will have a second opportunity to do so. Unless you want to take your rest of your public comment time to talk about it. So I want to make that perfectly clear for people. They can speak twice.
Okay. So we ready? Okay, we'll move on with the agenda. Item number 1, we have a resolution reappointment. Oh, we have public comment?
That's why I wanted to say that.
Oh, you're right. Never mind. Mr. Shelby.
Thank you. Good
I
morning.
thought we were going to do the board appointments first.
Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney. Just very briefly, ladies and gentlemen, to discuss the rules of decorum for today's meeting. If you wish to speak during general public comment, you should have filled out a speaker card and placed it in the box outside the room. 1 card per speaker. The cards are accepted up until the start of public comment. Each person submitting a card will be recognized by name. To approach and speak, a 3-minute time limit applies. Please print legibly. Names that cannot be read will not be called. Now, if you're here to speak at something listed as a public hearing, then use the sign-in sheet instead, and that's listed on the agenda as a public hearing. And the time to speak at that will be when the item is called up by the chair for the public hearing. Now, as Councilwoman Hurtak mentioned, the item for first reading on the ethics code is going to be moved up to after public comment. So per council's rules, you have the opportunity to speak at first reading on public comment. And the way things are going to work out then is you could have 3 minutes to speak on other items, and you can use your 3 minutes to speak on public comment on the ethics public hearing if that's your choice. If you wish to speak on all items at the same time, you can do that during general public comment, but it's your option as to when to speak to the ethics code. Now, members of the public are also reminded to please refrain from disruptive behavior, including making vulgar or threatening remarks or making or causing disruptive noises or sounds or displaying signs or graphics. And the chair will rule out of order any person who speaks without being recognized or attempts to address the city council from outside the speaker area at the podium. Persons failing to comply with the council rules may also be ruled out of order and, at the discretion of the chair, may be removed from the chamber for the remainder of today's meeting. Finally, city council members should refrain from engaging a speaker during public comment, and the public should be aware that city council does not take questions or have a dialogue during general public comment. This is your opportunity to express your position to the city council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelby. So good morning, everybody. We are going to start this morning. We have 1 online person for public comment. Michael Randolph, good morning.
Good morning. How's everybody? My name is Michael Randolph. Today I want to talk about improving tools to reduce displacement. This is part of a more comprehensive report that I put together with my friend AI. So it's entitled CRA Alignment with Displacement in Tampa. The Community Reinvestment Act has long directed capital to underserved areas. But in Tampa, as reinvestment accelerates, so does housing costs. Putting without safeguard for revitalization, it becomes exclusion. Nearly 40% of residents are rent burdened. Historic Black and Latino neighborhoods like West Tampa, Evo City, and East Tampa are being transformed, often without residents. The CRA, from compliance to equity. Michael Porter, critique of the CAR, still resonant. Compliance is not enough. CRA must evolve into not a regulatory checklist, and which we do now, but into a proactive tool that share values. To do that, Tampa has to align with the CRA and with anti-displacement strategy by first, refine displacement impact assessment. CRA-backed investment should evaluate the impact of housing equality and cultural continuity. Two, and incentivize affordable housing prevention. Three, embody community benefit agreement. The CRA project should include enforcement commitment to local harm, tenant protection, and cultural preparation. And four, supporting displacement risk mapping. Financial institutions can fund and use complete compose and incentive for improvement investment, the opportunities. The CRA is a powerful tool. By aligning with an anti-displacement goals, Tampa can protect the legacy community and prevent a deepened inequality and ensure the capital flow created equality and not resolved. Next week, I'll be talking about how to use the opportunity zone and also the community impact statement to supplement and reduce displacement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Randolph. Appreciate it. Okay, so in-person public comment. The first speaker is Elizabeth Dinwiddie, followed by Pamela Canella. No, not really. Not as many as normal. Good morning.
Hi there.
Morning.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Dinwiddie, also known by Liz Arcadu. I'm sorry?
Are you good? That was Mr. Michelini being disruptive. Yeah, you
Okay.
can start over. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, my name is Elizabeth Dinwiddie, also known as Liz Arcadu, my married name.
Steve,
I'm here.
excuse me, hold on one second. Mr. Michelini. Mr. Michelini, please. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
If he does that again, would you ask him to leave?
Yes.
Thank you. I heard him again. Okay, so, am I starting over?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Elizabeth Dinwiddie, also known as Liz Arcadu. I think this is just very sad. You know, hundreds of people were flooded in Palmacia Pines and Parkland Estates, and the fact that the city will not prioritize the safety of its people, and that you're making this about money is really disturbing. I am actually very disillusioned with the city that I'm living in. I thought this was a family city. I've raised my kids here, and I don't know where I'm living right now, because the fact that you will make this about money is very sad. It's just so sad. There is money in our budget. If we can afford the beautification of river walks and things like that, which I love. I love the river walk. But what are you telling people who visit Tampa? Should you put a flyer in every rental car that says, come enjoy the beautiful river walk, but don't drive down Azeel and Swan when it's raining? Because you may flood in your rental car. Is that what we're telling our tourists? That it's okay to have stormwater like a lake around a rental car? What if it's a Tesla? Do you care? Do you care about the safety of your people? I don't feel that you do. I feel that you like steak. That's what I think. I think you like steak. Okay? This is real. My neighbor next to me was pregnant when her home flooded. And I watched her crying in front of her house. And this type of stress, you risk a miscarriage. What are you guys doing up here? What are you doing? Because you're not protecting your people. Your city engineers are telling you this needs to happen. Your city engineers. But you want to listen to businesses who are worried about a loss of income while the project goes on. Why is road work on Howard Avenue not normal? Road work is normal. I drive all around this city and I'm detoured all the time because of this city's expansion. It is normal, but you've forgotten who owns Howard Avenue. We own Howard Avenue. The city of Tampa owns Howard Avenue. The city of Tampa owns Howard Avenue. It is not a private street. Those businesses don't own Howard. You do not have to ask them permission to do an emergency public safety project. This is an emergency. You are losing sight.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Pamela Cannella, followed by Tina Adams.
This goes first. We need this. How do you bring this down? My name is Pam Cannella. I want to address the letter from Mayor Jane Castor to City Council. I want to set the story straight on stormwater. Number one, I have been addressing the stormwater cleaning and maintenance of San Rafael Retention Pond and Palmyra Ditch since 2015. I believe that's a decade. And other neighborhoods have shared the same problem. Neglect is the correct word to use. Number two, it has never been said that the fault was in the in-house crew, but with management. With no manpower, broken or lack of equipment, and pulled to do other work, such as events. And even with constant calls and emails, management would not always address stormwater requests for cleaning. Number three, it was not until City Council public hearing that this stormwater problem was addressed by me and others sharing the same problem. Number four, stormwater cleaning was not all hands effort until after May of this year. Even after City Council allocated funds to hire contractors to help, we were already in the rain and hurricane season. Lucky we didn't have any, as Tampa was not prepared for this year. Cleaning and maintenance was not a priority. In-house crews were working on sidewalk and road cave-ins per Miss Lee, our city engineer. Number five, yes, capital improvements do fix some problems, but not the Howard project relief as it is presented. It does not address the flood area of Palmacia Pines and the hospital area that requires a pump to prevent flooding per vulnerability assessment report by the city. Our existing stormwater drainage system does work if it's cleaned. Our neighborhood depends on it. And even new projects need cleaning and maintenance. Number six, some neighborhood residents took it upon themselves to address the in-house crew in a negative way. They lost their homes, were devastated by last year's storm, and feared this year's storm. They wanted their storm drain system clean, but there were other residents that went out and supported these crews by giving them water and food as they worked in the hot sun without umbrellas because the city didn't provide it. Now, for the stormwater maintenance report, in my opinion, it is ambiguous. Under pond maintenance, mowing is considered maintenance by city management. Only some contractors pick up plastic and debris sometimes, not monthly. And grass clippings and leaves still go into our stormwater by the contractors. Number two, road cave-in repairs are not always repaired. They're only filled to come back later. I'm not finished, but I'll leave.
Tina Adams, followed by Tara Lozano.
Good morning. My name is Tina Adams. I'm here to voice my support for the South Howard Flood Project. I don't understand exactly the motions that were continued today. I thought they were additions to the original project to support the businesses on South Howard, to help them have access. And that's, I want to support the businesses, and just like I want them to support us, the homeowners that were devastated last year. I want to say thank you for funding the design of this project, and thank you for funding the maintenance of the stormwater system. However, maintaining an inadequate, outdated stormwater system will never be enough. We have cave-ins on all the roads, as you know, because I know you're a proponent of paving the roads. Putting patches isn't working. Just like was said before, the problem is under the streets, and the only way to fix it is to dig it up. It will be a disruption. It will be hard, but big problems require big solutions, and this is a big problem. 250 to 300 homes is, I think, a low estimate, because the city, from what I understood, calculated that by going around and counting the debris piles outside houses. I happen to know for a fact that there were some people that couldn't emotionally handle it, or physically or financially, and waited till later to do it. So I think that is a low estimate. And just like was said before, you have a duty to protect and serve your families. Without the families, the businesses won't survive. I want to support the businesses. I want to support the families too, though. And there should be a way to do it together. You've done it in Hyde Park. You learned from problems in Seminole Heights and did it better the next time. So put those good works to use, that good knowledge. The Parkland Civic Club came out with a statement of unequivocal support for this project. In April of 2025, they sent you a letter. Please support this project. Please let it move forward. Don't let it get more expensive. Delays cost money. There's no way around that. Believe me, I'm buying furniture. I know it costs a lot more money to delay. It has been a long, hard year. Please don't deny this much needed project. It will only get more expensive. I talked to one of the engineers, and he said it was unconscionable not to do this project. Thank you.
Tara Bloom, followed by Carol and Morning, Tara.
Good morning, Tara Bluma. The first thing I want to talk about is the Ferris wheel. It costs $120 for my family of 4 to go to the aquarium one time for the day. The Ferris wheel for my family of 4 will be around $130. So the argument that families, citizens of Tampa, who by the way are already subsidizing the aquarium with their tax dollars, have that much money to go and spend in one day out on the town with their family, and I have a small family, is unrealistic and unaffordable for most families. So then you are left to wonder who else is going to be going on the Ferris wheel. Well, there's the tourists and the people coming off of the cruise ships. But respectfully, the cruise lines that we have in Tampa are more budget-friendly cruise lines. And I don't know that those families have an additional $120 to $200 to go and spend on the Ferris wheel. Even if everyone loves the Ferris wheel idea, what are they gonna, it's not like they're going on this more than a couple of times ever, and you're committing this land for the next 25 years. There's no way you can stand up there with a straight face and say that a Ferris wheel is the highest and best use of that land for the next 25 years. Not to mention the fact that every single mom I have spoken to wants the splash pads back, and they want to be able to park at the aquarium. These are the people that actually go. Every single one of them said this is a dumb idea. And so I don't know who's supporting this or what would make you vote for it, but I haven't met anybody that actually is going to go and spend money on this maybe more than one time. Next on the changes with Grand Oaks and the trees, just briefly, it states that you need an arborist report. I just want to remind everyone that the state of Florida does not have a certified arborist license, and the closest certification you're going to get is ISA. The language in the ordinance, though, does not state that it needs to be an ISA certified arborist. It just says arborist. So anybody can claim to be an arborist in the state of Florida. Thank you for postponing the stormwater project. How are you paying for this project? We don't have the money, and our debt capacity with the stormwater improvement assessment is already 2/3 of the way gone. How many people is this going to help? For $100 million, if we're going to help maybe 200 people, you can write each of them a check for $500,000, build a park there, and call it a day. This is an irresponsible use of money. That is all.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Shelby?
Just a reminder, council, members, just a reminder, members of the public, number 61 regarding the Tampa Bay wheel is set for a public hearing. I don't know whether council wants, it's a legislative matter.
If they speak now,
Well, normally, ideally, in an ideal world, we'd
They
let
would
them
speak
speak
at
at
the
a public hearing. But because it's a legislative matter, I did not interrupt her, but I just want to let the public know that it is set for 10:30, some point after 10:30. Item number 61 is set on your agenda as a public hearing.
but that doesn't preclude them for the opportunity to speak during public comment if they, in lieu of speaking at the public item, no? Okay. If it's not okay, very good. So there we go. So we will not accept public comment for items that are set for a public hearing. There you go. Carol Ann Bennett, followed by Stephen McElhaney. Good morning, Carol Ann.
Hi, my name is Carol Ann Bennett. I went to 2 public meetings about the South Howard project, one at the church and one at the Garden Club. And I got to say, those meetings, especially the one at the Garden Club, one at the Garden Club was an embarrassment. It was one of the most horrible meetings I've ever been to, which is saying a lot. One of the things that was said by Mr. Bede at the church was that water doesn't like to turn, that the best route to send water is in a straight line. Every time you make a turn, you reduce the efficacy of the plan. And so I have asked in writing and in person over and over again, then why aren't we just going straight down Swan to the bay? No one has ever answered that question. No one has ever said, this is why that's not on the table. I think we absolutely have to have a flood relief project, but it has to work. That's the most important thing, is it needs to be a plan that will work. And my concern is that the multiple plans that have been proposed, the ones that are most being encouraged, might not work. And if they don't, many years from now, when we find out the hard way that they didn't work, the money's not going to be there, the will's not going to be there to go back and spend more money on it. We've got to make sure we have the right plan. And as hard as I have tried, I cannot get answers to my questions. I cannot get the information to feel like, yes, this is a good plan and it will do the job. Davis Islands, Forest Hills, the West Shore area, Port Tampa, all those places flooded horribly. People in Davis Island, I have a friend who said that the water didn't roll in from the bay, rise, and then roll into his neighborhood and flood his homes. It came up through the stormwater drains. He stood there and watched it come up through the stormwater drains. I understand that there's things that can be put in the drains to prevent that from happening. That needs to be done in areas like Davis Islands and some of the areas along West Shore. We need to look at the flooding problems throughout the city and come up with plans that will work, and we need to find the money to pay for them. Councilman Vieira said shortly after Forest Hills flooded that finding the money for pump stations and the different things we need is a priority, and he said maybe the time has come to do something about the Channel Side and downtown CRA so that more of that money goes into the general fund so that it can be used for these things. And I agree with Councilman Vieira 100%. I think that there are things that can be done with those 2 CRAs to get more money into the general fund, put every penny of it towards stormwater. I absolutely believe we need something that in those areas of Palmacia-Pimes and South Howard, but we need something that's going to actually do the job. Thank you.
Good morning, Council. Steve McElhaney. We've had a lot of discussion about South Howard, and we seem to be commingling water projects with stormwater projects, and it doesn't really make any sense. We really don't have the money to do this. We're in favor of a solution or many solutions, but it's really starting with maintenance, and we've already seen this year that with maintenance we have had a tremendous impact on deferring and addressing some of the stormwater issues. When this project started, this was almost 3 years ago, there was a discussion and a meeting with us, with the South Howard group, and that discussion was, we're gonna do one lane. We're only gonna do one lane, and we're gonna keep one lane open, and then it grew, and it kept changing. And so now it's the whole street. And so survival is not even possible. I mean, they talk about, well, we're gonna do it in sections. Well, it's not just one section. It's 2 sections ahead, 2 sections behind, and the section that they're working on. It simply is not tenable. We're working, and we'd like to see solutions, real solutions, and not one that costs $100 million and addresses 3 inches of rain. It simply is not cost effective. And then when you look at your own analysis that your staff has put together, the money's not there. And so what are you gonna do? When we start talking about the devastation, we're not talking about one or survivability of one business or 2 businesses. We're talking about a whole string of businesses from Swan all the way to the Bay Shore. It can't happen. And it's not a matter of not protecting the neighborhoods. The JMT report said, build a pump station and a retention pond inside Parkland Estates. They skipped right over that, and they picked up and they've said, well, we don't want to do pumps. When Pam Cannella went out and started looking and talking to some of the engineers, they told her, this pump doesn't work. It hasn't worked. We're not going to repair that. We're going to bypass it and put in a different system. It's time to stop bypassing the existing systems, fix them, make them work. Do the maintenance, interconnect these retention ponds, fix the drainage system before you start spending $100 million on a project that simply is untenable. Start looking at the other areas, as Carol Ann Bennett just pointed out. No one's talked about Palmetto Beach, which was devastated. What have you talked about Forest Hills? When have you talked about, the other areas that we're experiencing dramatic flooding that is constant? It's been going on for more than 40 years. It doesn't happen just one time. The flooding that resulted here was not from storm surge, except for Davis Island and the Bay Shore. It happened because of rainwater. And you do not have a system that has a capacity to deal with that.
Thank you, Mr. McElhaney.
Fix the system.
Thank you. Stephanie Pointer, followed by Allison Hewitt.
Good morning, my apologies, I was in the bathroom. Number 9, Nelson's Tree Farm. Man, I want to get in on some of that Nelson's Tree Farm money, because, man, they get money all the time from us. The contract says that we will deliver and install, that they will deliver and install for the price that's in the contract, but then on page like 48 or 49, I couldn't get in my computer, it says that we're going to pay an hourly rate to deliver and install it. So which is it? Is it free install or not? Number 21, Hannah Street, 161,000 square feet with a 5-story garage. I've never, ever been there that the first floor wasn't full. I mean, that it was actually full in the 5-story garage. And the 161,000 square feet, I'd like to know how much of it's being utilized. Number 31, small piece of land. Last time I checked, that's not a technical term. We should be talking about square footage for that small piece of land. And we want to make sure that it goes back into that community where they say that the money's going to go, because I'm still looking for my $2 million for the Gandy Bridge Park. Number 32, I'll skip that for now. Number 72, the memo just straight up makes the mayor look like she lied to me, because on the day that she presented the budget, she told me that they weren't going to use us stormwater folks for the parades anymore. that's between me and her. We'll have that conversation again later, but that's what she told me that day, and I memorialized it with my public comment that day. It's really sad that somebody's making her look like she lied to me. Number 74, the recovery funds. I'd like to know what gifts were given by zip code, because I want to make sure that the money that was redistributed by zip code is appropriate for where the damage was done by zip code. I'd also like to point out that Ms. McLean Evans, when she came up here, she said that the stormwater CIP funds have to be proven to benefit the most people. The most people. I'm really not seeing that. I'm seeing a few people coming up here who were devastated. Yes, they were devastated. But is it my fault as a citizen? Am I expected to pay for them not buying flood insurance? I live on a peninsula. I live on a dead end. I live in a flood zone. But I have flood insurance. Why? Because who doesn't? And we can't, the city cannot pay for other people's rolling the dice and they lost. I'm sorry. It's just not fair. And Carol Ann Bennett is absolutely correct. That meeting at the Garden Club for that Howard Avenue project was the biggest joke I've ever been to. I've never seen such chaos in my life. The one at the church was fared better, but honestly, those people got up there and said, we don't know that this is going to cure the problem. We don't know that this is going to cure the problem. Wait a minute. Why are we spending, throwing 60, 70, 80, I don't even know.
Thank you,
Why
Stephanie.
are we spending all that money?
Allison Hewitt, followed by Robin Lockett.
Good morning,
Good morning,
Allison
Allison.
Hewitt. I will keep the number, I was going to start at 32, but that's now just at the workshop. So I will go down to 69. So we have a formal creation of Office of Returning Citizens. Talking to people in the community who are active in this realm, and also the disappointment with the Reconciliation Commission. I just want to know, where is the report on that? It wasn't online, an update. Who are they speaking to? Because I know that there are several organizations who are active who have been speaking to councilmen, but they have not really been reached out by staff. Also want to make sure that when they do move forward, they coordinate with number 44, the Office for Hillsborough County Entrepreneur Collaborative. Even though it says in the report you're working on job training and certifications, I want to make sure that entrepreneurship is also one of the things that you're considered as far as this program that you are creating. I'd also say thank you for putting it on a workshop. There are folks who have asked me, well, you go up and you speak to city council, and who are you working for? We don't have you registered as a lobbyist, and I come here because I'm active in my community. I care about my community, and I need to be able to come here and talk to you. Now, I know specifics, I know how to research the details, but I don't do that for a fee. And so to be able to have me have to register is quite offensive for the people who really take the time out of their day, out of their work, to make sure that they are protecting and representing their community. And thank you for continuing that for additional conversation.
Thank you. Also, good job on a CRA explanation online. I saw something. It was really well written. Robin Lockett, followed by Connie Burton.
Good morning, Council. Robin Lockett. Just a brief statement, of course, regarding the Yellow Jackets. I would like for Council to consider making a motion to have a budget amendment brought forward to reallocate capital budget dollars into fiscal year 26 to support the design portion of the Yellow Jackets Field Enhancement Project. Really want to make sure that when this is all over, that money is designated and the project is able to be, whether you guys are here or not. But I really want to make sure that that money is there to continue. Hopefully for those of you running for re-election, you get elected, but you know, it continues after you. So, thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Connie Burton, followed by Matesna.
Good morning, Connie Burton. The enslavement of African people occurred around 1619. 305 years later, born this great author in 1924. He died in 1987 and to this day, 38 years later, what James Baldwin said was, and I quote, "To be a Negro in this country and be relatively conscious is to be enraged almost all the time." And it is so true. Because when I look at this agenda this morning, I'm trying to figure out, how do people that was forced into labor to build such, even this city, and we end up with relatively nothing? Item number 1, if you approve this person to the board, what has been their work as it relates to housing, around fair housing and ensuring that people that live in those communities or once lived in those communities is reaching the maximum benefit? Item number 32, you're going to talk about it, but the quickness and the way this is moving along. But we see item number 10 through 13 where the city is owning property inside the African community and holds on to it, only to be returned back to developers or nonprofits, and then folks in that community still cannot buy houses. People in our communities now, the cheapest house you could buy almost in East Tampa is $250,000. What's just about that? Item number 69, when you talk about an office of returning citizen, we don't need an office, we need action. We've been need action for every project that this city has worked on, whether it has been for stormwater, drainage, parking, whatever. There is ways in which returning citizens could have been brought on board without the magnification of having an office to say that we was actually doing the work. And as you hurriedly rushed to shut down the Racial Reconciliation Committee, it is so hypocritical for those that is now watching this nation almost drive over the cliff, where you are fighting to hold on to your democracy. Those of us that was born in part of the ancestry of 1619, we are watching to see what you will do to save it.
Thank you, Connie. Mentesna, followed by Pastor Williams.
Mentesna, Uhuru, Tampa, Florida. I want to say, if you live on Bayshore Boulevard, 20 days out of the year, you have to ask the police to get to your home because it's flooding. And if you live in South Tampa, about 30 days out of the year, you have to be detoured in order to get to your home. And when it starts raining, you have to start praying. When it starts raining, you have to start praying. But I want to speak today on the invocation. And the invocation that was given today was the most eloquent invocation I've ever heard in the history of my life. Right. And who was the invocation talking about? They say we're not allowed to talk about, identify city council members personally or anything of that nature. But the invocation was actually talking about someone right here. They wasn't talking about Donald Trump. The invocation was talking about the person who had me arrested for wearing a T-shirt. The person who had me arrested for wearing a T-shirt. That's who the invocation was talking about. 7 million people that came out this Saturday, last Saturday, on No King's Day, was talking about the king that sits right here in Tampa City Council. Because in the history of the United States, since 1779, no one has ever been arrested for wearing a T-shirt on public property. No one. It was a first. So what I like to say with that is, that's called a nigger charge. That's what it is.
Mr. Daniels, you're out of order.
Thank you. And for that reason, there are other charges that's very similar to that. Trespass after warning, resisting arrest with violence, loitering, conspiracy, possession with intent to sell, possession with intent to distribute, violation of probation, driving while black, walking while black, shopping while black, riding a bicycle while black, windows tinted too dark, I smell smoke, why are you acting suspicious, you fit the description, in a high drug area, high crime area. They're all in charges. Nothing more, nothing less. And let me tell you how in charges manifest themselves. Because you know why? Aubrey Pierce and Elvis Piggott. Aubrey Pierce, I never knew his name. We know him as Puff in the hood. But those are two Africans that's been arrested. But Keith O'Connor, John Bennett, and all the people at the Sheriff's Department, they ain't seen an Orient Road jail. They ain't seen it. They're all white, but the two black people had to see Orient Road jail. They're in charges. And the person that's responsible for that, or the people that's responsible for that, some of them sitting right here in the city council.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Good morning, Pastor Williams. Followed by Ashley Morrow.
My name is Pastor William, and I don't get much recognition, but I want to thank you all, especially, I can't call no name. Thank you for all of y'all that give me the cross and everything. You know, I want to give one of these flyers here to the city staff, because they say legal. You know, I've been complaining about I don't get no water. None of you all come out to check and see what's going on. Now they got a woman there by the name of B. B came out there and walked through my home, took all my stuff out of the yard, but the water's still not, it's cut on, but ain't no water coming through. I would like for all of y'all to come over to 3006 East Shadow Line, 3006 East Shadow Line. And I want y'all to see the meter for yourself. The meter's spinning like hell, but no water coming through. And it's a lady that used to work for y'all. I guess she called herself a prisoner of the inner prison of the. But what you need to do, you need to come over there, or send somebody over there, check my water out, please. Take this address down, 3006 East Shadow Line. And I'll show y'all for yourself and see exactly what's going on. I done crawled up under the house trying to find a water leak. Can't find none. But yet they cut my water off, and only way they want to cut it back on, I have to pay a certain amount of money. They want me to pay so much money, I might as well move out my house and go stay in a motel somewhere. But we have to understand, we are citizens of the United States, are not treated fairly. And when y'all were talking about the customer comment, now I was coming here with Frank Redding was here, and he told me, say, now Mr. Williams, you can talk about anything you want, but you got 3 minutes to talk about it. And I took my time and talked 3 minutes. Well, my time is quick. I can't speak it 2 minutes.
Thank you, Pastor.
Let me just, where that lawyer at?
We appreciate it.
I'm gonna give him a flyer.
Lisa, could you grab those from him?
I'll grab it.
Here, she's got them for me.
Give me the flyer, please. I will. And see that they read it. It ain't nothing but Bible scripture and the truth. Treat me like a customer. That's all I am. That's what it's like.
Good morning, Ashley. We look forward to this every week. Thank you.
I'm here. Good morning. My name is Ashley Morrow, and I will be sharing Tampa's Black History. All real estate located within the county as late as 1861 amounted in assessed value to $108,402. Slave value almost doubled that figure at $235,000. Given that about a quarter of all wealth within the county thus consists of slaves, many local residents would feel an immediate concern for national politics began to threaten their financial being. So I started to notice in the newspaper articles in the Florida Peninsula, which was a Tampa newspaper, how they kept mentioning slaver boats and things going back and forth between the U.S. and Cuba and Africa. I learned the word bozales, which means Africans that came straight from Africa to the U.S. or to Cuba. Okay, so they mentioned it a few times. So I was very curious as to how Tampa is connected to the African slave trade. Here's some articles, and this one even talks about how it's continuing in New Orleans, even after it had been outlawed in the U.S. in 1808. Tampa's founded in 1849, so it missed out on the early stages of that. So it's founded 40 years later. But Cuba continues until the 1880s. So we do see communication between Tampa and Cuba. We see a lot of it, actually. And the slave trade is showing how in Europe they would get goods, they would come to Africa, and in Africa they would pick up Africans, and they would come over to Cuba and get some sugar and tobacco and take it back to Europe because sugar was really valued. But there was also a huge cattle industry in Cuba and a huge cattle industry here in Tampa and in Florida. Now, when we talk about the cattle industry, we talk about how it relates to the Civil War, but the reason why there was already a cattle industry in place is because they were trading with Cuba. So William B. Hooker, he had a space that he would take his cattle. It's the Cattle King. And there's also Hooker, I think Hooker Lake or Hooker Pond or something like that. That's still here in Tampa. That's named after him. This is just an article advertising James going to Punta Rasa, which was another port, which was a big port that brought a lot of cattle to there to take to Cuba, Havana, Cuba. All right, and the sugar cane plantations were a lot in Cuba. All right, this is James McKay, the 34th mayor of Tampa. He claims that his father in 1858 decided to cut the middleman, not go to Punta Rasa, and go directly to Cuba to do trade as far as with cattle. Now, I want you to notice how James McKay had one enslaved person in 1850, and then by 1860 he had 7. All right? There's no documentation as to where he bought those slaves from or where he enslaved those black people from. However, there were a lot of enslaved people in Cuba. Therefore, I believe there was some slave trade between Tampa and Cuba.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much. I'll be back next week.
Have a beautiful day. Surrogate Doss. Okay, Councilwoman Hurtak.
Yes, I've been told by one of our aides that there are a couple of people who came in afterward who do want to speak on South Howard, and I feel like this is such an emotionally charged issue. I'd like to make a motion to allow people who came in late to speak.
So we have a motion to waive the rules to allow people to speak, to register to speak from Councilwoman Hurtak, a second from Councilman Maniscalco. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. The only thing I'd ask for, I won't ask you to fill out a card now, but before you leave, if you could fill out a card so we have that for public record.
If maybe one of our aides could come out and pass out those cards, that'd be great.
Yeah, excellent. Surrogate, go ahead.
All right. Listen, now, I'm Chagret Dawson. I want to speak to the people of Tampa, veterans, and anybody else who wants to listen. And I heard y'all mention it earlier today, but regarding integrity and ethics, I kind of chuckled to hear it, especially in this city. But Willie D reminded me last week that when you refuse to call out BS, you are complicit in your silence, and I can't do that. Especially about the misconduct that I see going on in Tampa and Hillsborough County, the state of Florida, and you'll see it in those letters I just wrote, those letters that I wrote and distributed to those judges. Now, a few weeks back, I gave y'all some information also about abuses of power by judges and local people like attorneys from Alston, Basel, Banker, Gassler, Lopez and Gassler, and a couple other law firms. And these firms, along with State Farm Insurance Company, undermine veteran health care at James A. Haley Hospital here in Tampa. And some local judges act like black folks ain't got rights, so they got the respect. Now, I gotta denounce Stephen Smith for bringing energy to Jasmine Crockett and looking like, and skinning and grinning like a happily broken buck while doing master's bidding, but he didn't have that same energy for them white boys in that GOP chat. I got a problem with that. But at any rate, this council has become a harbinger of public fiduciary misconduct. You know, you kind of invite unethical and even sometimes criminal behavior because you choose comfort over courage. So I got to ask the question, I saw a couple of things in this agenda. What price, if any, do you all take for turning a blind eye when you know people are being violated? And as a veteran, I respect authority, and people know I took an oath for life. But I do know that my judicial complications aren't because I lack any kind of sufficient legal acumen. Even if the people don't know, everybody in here knows I really am like that. And a lot of people in power hate that I personify what mediocrity fears the most, which is I'm audacious, intelligent, and unapologetic about that. I have confidence, and it's all fused in melanin. And I won't be subjugated by strategically placed bigots in power. And I say what I say the way I do because ain't no curve in my vertebrae. And that's even a shout out to my man, my son. But I'm the problem that y'all wasn't ready for. I'm the spook that's sat by the door because of my education and my experiences in life. And I have an ardent resolve. We know where my appeal is against the city, but that's not the issue. But I will say that like Django, I'm that 1 in 10,000 that won't bend or break because of a little bit of pressure from outside. And I'll say some interesting things have happened also lately regarding some guys that have issues with the Department of Revenue. They bring this to my attention, and you all have investigatory power, and I know that there's at least 3 attorneys that are facing me right now, and you have obligations once something is brought to your attention. Over there at the in the 13th particularly, we have blatant abuses of procedural process when it comes to the Department of Revenue and child support. My issues are pretty much behind me. So well, actually, they are behind me. But there are many gentlemen that come to me daily about why won't anybody do anything about the violations that are being conducted by judges and hearing officers over there at the Department, over here at the 13th Judicial Circuit and with the Florida Department of Revenue. I would highly hope that you all use your investigatory powers. And even if you don't think it's in your jurisdiction within the city of Tampa, some of you attorneys do have the obligation that once you are aware that a colleague or anybody in a position of any bar member violates their oath, that you all have a responsibility to have it investigated. That being said, shout out to the greatest institution of higher learning in the city of Tampa, the University of Thomas Jefferson High School. Y'all ain't got no state championship.
Thank you, Mr. Doss. Okay, Victor Mayo, bring it home. Victor DeMaio. State your name.
Victor DeMaio, AKA Al Pacino. I'm some occasionally known as. Anyway, 1205 North Franklin Street. I'm here to representing Burn Steakhouse, Epicurean Hotel. One thing is I wanted to make a point of is that if somebody gives you an opinion, they say you got 3 months to live, the first thing you want to do is I want a second opinion. When this thing started over a year ago, we brought a gentleman, his name is David DeLoach, he's a stormwater engineer, had a 30-page resume, and he says you do have an alternative to putting a $100 million pipe from Swan to Bayshore, which I've spoken to a couple of gentlemen here, and they said, you know, if that water goes all the way down to Bayshore, and it's a storm, and it's a high tide, and we're in the middle of a hurricane, there's nowhere for that water to go. It's gonna go back up in Howard, and you've just spent $100 million at one project when the entire city, and with all due respect to Parkland Estates, I don't know what you're doing in Bowman Heights, where I live, West Tampa, East Tampa, North Tampa. You know, I've learned over the last 48 hours that you're tapped out on money. Manhattan is a flood zone if you want to drive down there any time of day when it rains. So my point is I want to show you something here. I don't know if we could zoom in on this or not. I don't know how this thing works exactly, but I guess I could put it in closer.
No, you have it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. There are 4 alternatives here. guess I went too close.
No, your phone went off.
I'm sorry.
Turn your phone back on.
Oh. I'm not that smart. Anyway, Jesus Christ. All right. If, by the South Tampa Hospital here, you see these two pink areas? Those are 4 city square blocks of existing stormwater retention ponds. And as you know, if you've ever been down to into the Hyde Park area, there's a huge retention pond right here that's owned by the Crosstown. And there's a huge city-owned, this huge area, which is a ballpark right now next to the old Winn-Dixie store. I think it's an Aldi now. The stormwater engineer we spoke to says every single one of those areas can be redesigned and re-put a vault. Every new building that is built in Tampa, as you know, has to retain its own water. So they put a vault to retain the water. So you can triple the size of all those areas without spending $100 million. You can get it done faster, quicker, easier, with a whole lot less money, and retain the water without building that pipe from Swan to Bayshore. I've talked to 3 mayors that had the same option to do this pipe, and they all said, we're not going to disrupt the businesses on Bayshore. Burn Steakhouse, we have 400 employees. Epicurean, 300 employees. If a guy and we had to dig to do the elevators, we had to pump water for 4 months. If they tell you something's going to take 2 months, it'll take 4 months.
That's it.
Sorry.
Okay, that concludes public comment. Thank you very much. We are moving on to board administrative appointments. We have item number 1. We do this for the board appointments? I thought we were going to do it. Yeah, you're right. You said
It said after public comment.
You're right. You're correct. Is Saul Hamani in the audience? By any chance, Saul, do you want to can we waive the rules since he's here? Okay. With your unanimous consent, I'm going to go ahead and get the board appointment so he can. Saul, thank you very much. So we have item number 1. Saul, would you like to address council, or you're just here for the vote? Okay, very good. Okay.
Shelby come back with the actual resolution?
It is the resolution. Yeah, it's already done.
Just move the resolution.
Okay, we have a motion to move item number 1 from Councilman Maniscalco, second from Councilman Miranda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Congratulations, Saul. Thank you. Okay, now we are moving on to item 64. Here we go. Tag, you're it.
Yes. Good morning. Megan Bernholz-Couture from the legal department. There are a few sections of this ordinance that I suggest that we address today because they comply with or are consistent with Florida state statute and the Florida Constitution. First, sections 2-502 and 2-581 deal with post-employment restrictions, and they should be revised to be consistent with the Florida Constitution. Second, sections 2-658, 2-626, and 2-662 must be revised to be compliant with section 112.326 of the state statute. These deal with the personal knowledge standard in complaints. The city can't initiate an ethics complaint, and the attorney's fees and costs from a malicious complainer, the process for those to be recovered. Next, section 2-624 concerns ethics training requirements and should be revised to be consistent with section 112.3142 Florida statutes. Finally, sections 2-502 and 2-626 must be revised to fix wrong references to state statutes. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Councilman Maniscalco.
As I mentioned in comments earlier, the biggest thing was that private individuals that are not being compensated to have to register as lobbyists in order to speak to council members. I know there's others that need to comply with state law, but this is something that was brought on from here, at the local level. It's not. Am I wrong to ask that having people register as lobbyists, is that a requirement by state law? No.
No.
Okay, so that needs to be removed before anything moves forward. Because again, if people want to talk to us, private individuals, regular people at whatever, the grocery store, the church, the gas station, the coffee shop, should not have to register. And again, those are the emails that we've gotten bombarded with, you know, and it's just a common sense issue. You know, if people want to talk to us, they want to talk to us. Neighborhood individuals, neighborhood groups, neighborhood presidents, whatever it is. So that was my one concern.
Before we move on, do you have a list by chance of all of the statutes that you quoted, that you put on the Elmo?
Yes, I've got it down at the very bottom of my notes.
Then we can always go back and reference it if we have that. Perfect. Sure. Thank you. Yeah, but I mean, that's better than nothing. Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, as the city attorney recommended earlier, I think we ought to have a de novo hearing, first and second reading on the state required changes. But instead of city council initiating, I think the legal department ought to do that, and then that will give the public a chance to weigh in on those. There's the bigger question about whether we should have duplicated efforts anyway, because this all is covered under the state law. And then I can make a motion an hour later, but my recommendation is that we after we hear public comment, we end this, and then we let the city attorney come back to us with a notice public hearing just to talk about the state required changes. That way the public can specifically weigh in on that. There's been so much attention about these other things that the public may not have fully looked at this. At the same time, Chair Clendenin may make a simultaneous motion to end the duplication of effort anyway. And then I think we need to separately set up a discussion at the workshop in February to talk about whether this committee and this process is effective at all. I've heard numerous complaints about it, and instead of going through adjudicating all those complaints right now, I think we should put those in a public hearing in the future.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hurtak.
Thank you. So I have a question. If we decide to go ahead with Chair Clendenin's recommendation of just allowing the state to cover it, what are the downsides for the city?
So there are other reasons in here besides the definition of lobbyist. There's also lots of compliance with current practices.
But again, that's my question is, if we just let state law supersede, what's the harm?
There is no harm.
Okay, that's what I wanted to answer. Thank you.
May I clarify one thing? There's one thing in our ethics code that we wouldn't have if we did away with the ethics code in its entirety. There may be others, but the one thing that comes to mind is we did create that whole process requiring all visitors that meet with city council members, department heads, the mayor, to fill out meeting logs and state who they're meeting with and the purpose of the meeting and if they are representing anyone. We've had that for years. We had that happened before the full ethics code was adopted, but it's in the ethics code now. So if you wiped out the ethics code entirely, that would go away. The other thing I would say is there may be some other things in the ethics code that we may want to save that aren't addressed by state statute. So I don't think it's fair. I think Megan thought you were asking her about this particular ordinance, but there are other parts of the ethics code that we should probably look at. But you know, again, that we could do that before, you know, either discuss it during that February workshop and be prepared by then to say, you know, what we can rely on the state for, what we might want to do something separate for.
And thank you. This is the whole reason I wanted to have this discussion, because I would like to add to your motion to say that if we want to, during the workshop, you want staff to bring back just what the state is. I would like to know, again, from our legal department, what other types of changes we would need if we wanted to hold on to some of those. But I do believe that's a good conversation we could have at that workshop.
Yeah, in February.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, I think we could talk about that in February, and we could. I believe in what Ms. Zellman just said. We need to keep the existing reporting structure for paid lobbyists, not add neighborhood leaders and others. But that can be handled in a separate process, and it doesn't necessarily need a committee that has a lot of allegations against it. I don't want to go through all those right now, but we need a fair process. And we also need to make sure that the administration is held accountable to the same rules that city council is. And if a lobbyist meets with the mayor or city council, they have to register. They can't say that they're not a lobbyist if they're paid to be a lobbyist. Can we make motions now, or are we waiting to hear from the public first?
We're going to hear from the public first. Councilman Carlson, you have some, or Councilman Miranda?
I'm listening to everything right now, and like we said, there might be some things that we have that they don't have that's better. I don't know.
Yeah,
until we have a hearing.
I'm going to reserve my comments until, because it appears as though this will get continued to February. So I'll wait to listen to public comment, listen to that motion, and I'll reserve my comments for February if that's what happens to this. So are you finished with your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Good job. Is there anybody in the public that wishes to speak to this item? If so, would you please line up on the wall? And I'll call you in order that you line up.
Do you want to mention the 11 o'clock deadline, or?
Oh, yeah, by the way, we have a hard stop in 19 minutes. So, yeah, we're just for everybody that knows, we have a closed session. Mentesna, go ahead. Start with your name, please.
Uhuru Mentesna, Tampa, Florida. Irrespective of what the code is, the politicians and the lobbyists are all crooked. Every last one of them. So they're going to find ways around it. And they always finding ways to conspire to bypass anything. And you can look around the services in your city and you can see, as a matter of fact, the politicians and the lobbyists don't even have to conspire anymore. They're so on track that they know what they want to do. They know what the other one wants. So as far as how this works in the interest of the public, on the interest of individual rights and the protection of politicians, lobbyists, private industry, big donors, or whatsoever, projects getting awarded to like certain people or certain companies, it's not going to make any difference. The city and the politicians have been crooked from 1855 and they're crooked today in 2025. It's going to make no difference. And the biggest part of this is this city council never abide by the Florida Sunshine Rule and the Sunshine Act to begin with. And they proved that on July 31st and August 7th when they conspired to have me arrested for wearing a t-shirt. So nobody took ethics or ethics codes into consideration then. Nobody took if they should have been having a meeting to conspire to have me arrested and drug out of here like an animal. Not saying anything bad against animals, but nobody was concerned about ethics codes then. So the fact of the matter is, no matter how they adjust this, the politicians, the lobbyists, and the business interests, they're going to come out the winners.
Thank you. Caroline?
Caroline Bennett, it is extremely hard to participate in what goes on in the city. It's a very challenging thing for the average citizen. Most people are too busy just trying to get through the day, and all their time and attention is focused on their life. The effort it takes to be involved is so high. It's very disturbing that anyone would want to raise that bar even higher. The current people who are legitimate lobbyists are not always following the rules and doing everything that currently is required of them, and the Ethics Committee is not enforcing it. So why give them more people to have jurisdiction over, or to monitor, maybe is a better word, when they're not even really adequately monitoring the people who are paid lobbyists? You have to fill out the lobbyist, you have to become a registered lobbyist, you have to document every meeting, the purpose of it, who you met with. You got to do an annual report saying your expenses. If you don't do the report on time, there's a $50 a day fine. That is going to stop people dead cold in their tracks. Gadsden Park, the dugouts, they're a disgrace. There are things falling on children's heads. So someone, a Little League parent, wants to meet with each one of their city council members or the head of parks and talk about what are we going to do. Now they've got to jump through all these other hoops, and they're just trying to get through the day. So this is a very bad idea. It sounds to me like y'all really understand that and you're going to do something about it, and I never doubted that you would. So I say thank you.
Hey, 1 second. If you are here for the public hearings, we are not going to be able to get to those before. We have a closed session at 11, and then we will break for lunch. So we will not hear these public hearings until 1 p.m. So if you're here, I will not hold them till 1 p.m.
You don't think we'll get through?
No. We've only got 14 minutes. I'll get into the closed session.
Go to lunch early. Good morning, Stephanie Pointer. I just wanted to point out that this is the problem child for the folks at home who haven't seen this and are like, what's the big deal? I'd like to point out that about a year and a half ago, because this is not just about talking to our elected officials, it's about talking to upper echelon city staff. So a year and a half ago, I woke up 6 o'clock in the morning. I've got text message after text message and messages on Facebook. We don't have any water. Port Tampa didn't have any water. I picked up my phone. I texted. I happened to have Rory Jones's email or phone number and Eric Weiss's phone number and said, you know, we have no water down here. They didn't know. It had went off at 2:15. We had a cave-in down there. Nobody knew. If this kind of trash goes into our code, I can't pick up the phone and text somebody to help our community. It may have been 2 days before we got through the rigmarole to get all the way to the top to make sure that this got fixed immediately. It was fixed the same day because the citizens were able to communicate with staff. It's not just about you guys. I love you guys, and if I see you at Home Depot or Walmart, I want to be able to talk to you. But the same should go for staff. No, not you. Anyway, so bottom line is this is offensive. And yes, I may have started this. Thank you, Andrea. But I started it when I went and kept asking why we weren't having a ethics commission meeting. I started it when I asked why the Ethics Commission did not improve the investigation of Councilman Dingfelder and Councilman Goods. I started this when I said I filed 5 ethics complaints because people were doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing. I filed an ethics complaint because people were publicly stating that they were meeting with lobbyists and they weren't registered. So if I started it, that's okay, I'm good. But I'd like for them to enforce the stuff that they're supposed to be enforcing before they start shutting me, Carol Ann, Connie Burton, Tony Daniels, anybody else who wants to contact you and have a conversation with you about their community. It's not right. This is egregious. And I haven't even read the rest of it yet. Trust me, I will, and I'll let you know what I think of the rest of it. But this is absolutely uncalled for. It is putting a barrier between us and our elected officials, us and city staff, which is absolutely uncalled for. It is not transparent. It's not accountability. It's nothing that everybody says that they stand for. I can't even sit over here and have a conversation with Chief Bennett before we have council meetings every Thursday. Give me a break.
Thank you, Ms. Pointer.
Save the sidebars.
Mr. Michelini.
Good morning, Steve Michelini. I think I'd like to echo the concerns that, as written, this is very broad and too broad in scope. It includes a lot of other things. So if you file for a variance or you file for a rezoning or a special use, there are staff discussions at high levels. They go back and forth. They send you comments. I'm sure they didn't mean to include that as a lobbyist activity, but if you read that in a conservative way, it is included. You know, the non-paid discussions for individuals that appear before you or meet with you absolutely should be excluded. If you're not paid and you're representing an association or neighborhood or an individual, take it out. There's no reason for it to be in there in the first place. It's just too broad and it's too difficult to understand exactly. I mean, they're reciting state laws and then you got to go and try to figure out what state law they're referring to and what is the impact. Then you got to call the attorneys and say, what does this mean? And their interpretations are, you know, sometimes in their discussion, they're convoluted. Anyway, basically, it needs to rewrite, it needs to start over and discuss legitimate discussions. If they are paid lobbying, absolutely, discuss them, lobby them, register them, and put them on the record. The other stuff, when you're representing different organizations that are not paid, take them out. There's no reason for it. If you read this in a most conservative manner, you would have hundreds and hundreds of filings every day for every permit that's filed, for every rezoning, for every variance that is being applied for. It simply isn't necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Tara?
Hi, Tara Bluma. I wasn't going to talk about this until I heard Ms. Zellman state that while there was a mistake in this ordinance, we do need to pass it because we need to become into compliance with city law. And I would like to start seeing clean proposals put in front of you so that you are not pressured to pass something that you might find elements of unsavory in order to follow the letter of the law. We were out of compliance yesterday. The sky is not going to fall down if we stay out of compliance until February. Right. And that puts undue pressure and backs you all into a corner. So don't put something controversial paired with something that has to be done. Right. That's not fair. And I would start saying no in general, standing up to the city staff and the administration and say, no, we are not going to continue to pass these things. I appreciated the fact that you did that with the reimbursement resolutions and finally said, no, we're not going to pass them all as a group. We want to be able to look at them individually. So please continue to stand up for yourselves in that way, because you're giving away power when you do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Al, on Victor.
Yes, Victor DeMille, 1205 North Franklin Street. I'd agree with Mr. Michelini, and I actually agree with the chair that we do have ethics laws here in that every official, whether you're with a city council, county commission, school board, legislator, the state of Florida has ethics laws governing all your actions as well. If you want to add a couple more things that aren't intrusive to neighborhoods or people on the street, that's another story. But frankly, the problem we have here is who's actually doing the work to do the investigating, to do the tracking. I think that's a big problem here in the city of Tampa, because it seems to be very haphazardly looked at and very haphazardly associated with the actual monitoring of it. So that's the problem I see with the city, is that they don't really have a very good process and procedure of actually monitoring this sort of thing. So I think if you do this, please exclude the neighborhoods, people on the street, people that go up to see you every day and ask or send you an email, to not be swept into the whole umbrella of being monitored under the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carlson, ready to take a motion?
May I say one thing?
After the motion.
Okay.
Like to move to continue, what is it, item 64 to the February workshop.
Okay. We have a motion from Councilman Carlson to continue item 64 to the February 26, 2026 workshop. Councilwoman Hurtak as a second, and Councilwoman Hurtak, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I also wanted to say, I would like the motion to differentiate between, if Councilmember Carlson agrees, to have a clear ordinance just for state, or, yeah, just a clear ordinance to have us aligned with state statutes and state laws, and then the other issues that might come under the ethics code, so that we can discuss each one and what we want to keep and if there's anything we want to change.
I would suggest a new business.
I have a suggestion, if I may.
Oh, okay.
And I need Marty's help.
Ms. Zellman, go ahead.
Okay, first I want to be clear, because apparently I wasn't. I did not say you need to pass this today. First of all, you can't pass it today. This is only first reading and consideration. And no, neither the legal department or the mayor is recommending that you move forward with those changes to the lobbying as it's currently written. So I just want to be clear on that. I didn't say that, and I'm not saying that.
I think that was clear.
I think a way we could get out of today, Marty, correct me if I'm wrong, today is only first reading. Don't read the ordinance. I believe then, Marty, correct me if I'm wrong, it will then die. And then you can direct us to come back with an ordinance with just the changes that we're advocating for, which again are the ones that Megan cited for you. You could also make a motion to discuss the ethics ordinance and the ethics commission broadly in February. That may be a cleaner way to get out. Is that?
Well, I think you're missing the one element is discussing, is there a need for the city of Tampa?
Right, you could do that at your
February
workshop, whatever day you want to have it.
I agree with that assessment. I think, I agree, and correct her if we're wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. If we just don't read this, it will die. And then we continue the item, we'll go ahead and entertain the continuation now rather than new business.
Yeah.
And maybe we can subsequently have discussion about the clarification we're requesting from the administration to be able to have this information in February.
Before you answer, instead of a continuation,
No.
maybe, why don't we just make a separate motion to put this subject on the agenda and then
that's not a
separately
bad
you
idea.
could make
Let
a
this
motion
die.
on your other item.
My suggestion, council, would be to make a motion, especially considering the city attorney says they don't recommend that portion in this ordinance, just to have number 64 removed from the agenda. Just remove it from the agenda, and then have that motion for February.
Can I hear a motion to remove item 64 from the agenda? We have a motion from Councilman Maniscalco, a second from Councilman Randall. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. And is there another motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to put on the February workshop a discussion about whether and how to update the city's ethics code and to look at the effectiveness and structure of the Ethics Commission to see if it needs to be modified.
Second.
Or eliminated. Or eliminated.
And maybe you could do a separate one about eliminated.
Okay.
So second, and that's February 26, 2026.
Correct. We have a motion from Councilman Carlson, a second from Councilwoman Hurtak. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. And I'll reserve my other motion for another date. So.
And I just want to say.
Can I make that motion or?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Well,
Councilwoman
yeah,
Hurtak.
he had a chance. So I just want to say, just very quickly, because we don't have a lot of time, that one of the things I am most proud of in my time here has been an increase in the public participation in city council. I'm incredibly proud of that. I believe all of us would say that. And so to say that we want to prevent that is something no one on this council wants. And I strongly believe that. And I want to thank every single person who's watching, every single person who shows up, every single person who stops us in the grocery store. That is very important to us.
Can I answer a joke there? Councilman Carlson.
Just a separate motion to be adjacent to the motion for the workshop in February would be to discuss whether the city's ethics code is duplicative and whether it should continue in its current form or to be modified or eliminated.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councilman Carlson, a second from Councilwoman Hurtak. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Okay, it is 10:59. That's perfect. Okay, but yeah, boy, sometimes a plan comes together. You got less than 60 seconds to say whatever you want to say before I read
So
this.
are you sure you don't want us to come back at 11:30 and do a half hour?
I don't know how long this is going to last.
Okay,
so
then 1 o'clock it is.
Yeah, okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can, before you read that, I just want to be clear. What you're suggesting then is council is going to, after you read your statement.
I'll clarify this now.
And then what time we come back?
We're going to come back at 1 p.m. 1
p.m.
Yes, we'll come back at 1 p.m. to continue with the consent agenda. Okay, at this time, in accordance with Florida Statute 286.0118, we will proceed to a closed attorney-client session to discuss settlement negotiations in the case of Tony Hops versus the City of Tampa, case number 824-CV02806 VMC AEP, which is currently pending in the Middle District of Florida. This closed session is estimated to last approximately 30 to 45 minutes and will be recorded by a certified court reporter. The names of the persons attending the closed session are as follows: Councilmember Bill Carlson, Councilmember Alan Clendenin, Councilmember Lynn Hertek, Councilmember Guido Maniscalco, Councilmember Charlie Miranda, Councilmember Luis Vieira, City Council Attorney Martin Shelby, City Attorney Andrea Zellman, Assistant City Attorney David Harvey, and Certified Court Reporter Cheryl Westfall from the court reporting firm of Carolyn Loudon and Associates. At the conclusion of the closed attorney-client session, this meeting will be reopened and I will announce the termination of the session. A transcript of the closed attorney-client session will be made part of the public records upon conclusion of the litigation in the Hobbs case. We are now in recess and we will reopen this meeting at 1 p.m.
Mr. Chairman, if I
We're
can.
adjourned?
No, if I can. What you read is exactly the case. You're going into closed session, going into recess for a closed session. You will have to return here before you adjourn or to go into recess for lunch at 1 o'clock. So after the completion of the closed session, you have to come back in open session and announce that it is now closed, the closed session is ended.
Okay, so I need a quorum here is when we leave this closed session, I need a quorum to show up at this chamber to be able to do what he just described. Thank you. We are in recess and 8th floor conference room, is that, okay, okay.
Muted.
Linda.
Here.
Maniscalco. Hurtak.
Here.
Vieira. Carlson. And Clendenin.
Here.
We have a physical quorum.
Thank you. In the case of the Tony Hops versus City of Tampa, case number 824 CV 02806, VMC AEP, which is currently pending in the Middle District of Florida, is closed. The session is closed, and the City Council is back in order. I'd like to hear, ready for lunch? Yes. So this City Council will be in recess until 1 p.m., and we're out. Thank you.
Muted.